was mentioned before, never thought about coming to Israel to making Aliyah. They really wanted to see their family and their kids growing up in the Jewish community. And I have to mention that the Rich Life and the camps run by the Jewish Agency provided the base for these people to be familiar with our activity. A lot of these people, when we ask them, how did you find us? How did you make your way to Romania? They would mention, our kids went to summer camp. We were familiar with the Jewish Agency and what the agency making for them. Amount of parents of Masa participants and Sela students before their parents families that I've met in Romania was extremely high. People are also, I would have to say that once the war will be over, I can see a lot of them going back and rebuilding the rich life that they used to have there.
So how does the Jewish Agency deal with bringing people to Israel on Aliyah? And what percentage of the people that they bring do you expect to stay in Israel? What percentage do you expect to go back? And at the same time, there's another question on the chat saying, I mean, why are Russian Jews leaving at this particular point in time? Are they concerned because of the propaganda? Are they concerned about, I mean, I know we don't want to get too political, but is there a particular reason? Do they see the future as shakier because of this war?
So I'll start by saying that just the one who came from the Ukraine. As I told you previously, those people didn't plan to make Aliyah. But when they look back what's left behind, a lot of them will understand that there's nothing to go back to. Looking about the economics, definitely, homes that have been ruined. Now, would they stay? My answer is the following. The majority of them would like to stay. But this is where our role is into the picture of making sure that the absorption, their klita, will be well being taken care of.
Exactly.
To be honest, the immediate thing was to bring them to a safe place. When they get to Israel, by the way, they're entitled to a month to stay in the hotel. Today, now there's going to be a government resolution about financial assistance for them. But now we are starting to work together with the Ministry of Aliyah and Klita and other agencies about employment program and about a housing program. Israel is in a crisis of already of housing. But nevertheless, we need to find solutions for those olim. There are now different programs like First Home in the Homeland and other that we're going to expand. I see that as an opportunity. I see that as now an opportunity and a responsibility. An opportunity that they can and a responsibility to make them stay. In terms of Russia, I will not get into too much of politics, but I can tell you that many Jews, mainly young Jews, feel that for the future, maybe Russia is not the place that they want to stay on. Given the way this country is being run. It's not about propaganda, I think. It's about freedom. And they understand that their freedom might be in jeopardy if you look about the future. And nevertheless, a lot of them feel that this is not a place they want to stay, a place that's starting a war and other things that you will understand in which other regime that they are living at. And they're seeking for a better future. They're seeking for a democracy. And by the way, economically wise, the sanctions for a lot of people that have been working and now being in a situation where financially they are in distress. Therefore, Israel is one of the best options for them.
Okay, thank you. Before we go back to some of the general policies and principles and of the whole situation, I was wondering if you might tell us one or two personal stories of what it really means. I mean, you know, we're sitting here in Australia and we're looking at this and we say, okay, the Jewish Agency is picking him up, taking him on an aeroplane, but a lot happens to get person A from a city or a town or a village in the Ukraine to the border. Who's responsible for that? And once they come to the border, how do you tell in an emergency way who is eligible for Aliyah? You already mentioned about Al Pi Halakha, according to Halakha and according to Hok HaShvut, the law of return, but there are people who won't fall into either category. So just give us maybe one or two, you know, personal examples of a story of how this starts and how it develops and how it finalizes.
So there's two ways to leave Ukraine today. In the beginning, a lot of people as individuals by themselves have decided to leave their home and to get into the borders. What we did is a massive campaign with a hotline that everyone can call, but also we have deployed staff to with uniform of the Jewish agency, flags in all of the crossing borders, a big sign, by the way, of Magen David and the flag of Israel. And people that have Jewish identity just came to us, to the border itself, say, hi, I'm Jewish, I'm a member of a community, and I want to make Aliyah. So a lot of people in the beginning came on the individual basis, and we had our team over there waiting for them. The second thing is organized Aliyah. Communities that have decided to leave Ukraine are in touch with our shlichim, and we are sponsoring the buses and the transportation. I will elaborate and give a couple of personal stories in a second, but they are hiring buses that we are paying, and we know that in this day, a bus is leaving the community in Kharkov or in the Dnipro or in Mariupol. By the way, we don't know when they're going to get to the borders. We know when they are leaving, but it's very, very difficult to do to travel in Ukraine. I'll tell you that a bus today in Ukraine costs approximately between $7,000 to $9,000. Okay, you can imagine that this is not the real cost of the bus, of the petrol on the bus itself, but in the way you have to cross the Russian checkpoint, then you have to cross the Ukrainian checkpoint, and sometimes we need to pay for a escort of the police and other means. This is I'm telling it now in a very sterile world, but just think about people that have been notified that in this day and this hour they have to come to one place and then get to the bus. Sometimes people couldn't arrive because they were bombing, okay? And people couldn't leave the houses, and we don't want to put them in jeopardy where they will come and the buses will be under threat. But thank God today we have a good network of organizations in bus organization in Ukraine. Also, we have Christian friends, I have to say, Christian friends of Israel that have decided upon themselves to rent bus and to do it automatically. We have local workers in Ukraine, but they have took themselves as well. And there are routes, I don't have the PowerPoint over here, but I will send it to you, Ron. There are actually different routes that we know at what time of the day. By the way, if there's a humanitarian corridor that now the Russians have declared, so people will leave. But they arrive to the border. Once they arrive to the borders, we identify them, and we have buses that will take them either to Warsaw, Kishinev, Budapest, and over there they will get to the hotel quietly and nicely. There, in the beginning of the war, we had Nativ. Nativ is the organization who's in charge on the eligibility of former Soviet Union. This is not the Jewish agency role. And they conducted the interviews in the hotel. But we realized that it takes too long. Therefore, we got into an agreement with the government that Jewish agency shlichim will do what we call the green pass. They will interview you on the spot. And if they will identify that there's a big potential that you are eligible, you will fly to Israel and continue the process over here, because we didn't want to delay the people in the countries. By the way, 97% of those who brought to Israel without the full process have been Aliyah eligible. So we're looking about 3% that eventually didn't get the approval. That's fine. Israel can manage. But our main concern was, Ron, is to make sure that they arrive to Israel as soon as they can, and not to leave them in Europe. And that was the mission. I have to say we have brave people. Valentina is one of them, by the way. But people that are spending hours 24/7 in the borders itself. Actually, we also did, I'll share you the picture afterwards, Ron, you can share with the group. We took a bus and we branded, we call it Aliyah Israel, with Wi-Fi and food and such. So people that are wandering themselves, we can pick them up on our buses and to take them into a safe place. Today, we see less of individual coming. We see more of organized group are coming. Also, the pace of the refugees, depending on the pace of the war, meaning now we see less from Kiev because there's less of a war in Kiev. But I can tell you, and you're reading the report as I am, and we are in touch with communities, is that they are very, very concerned in Odessa. They are very, very concerned in the Dnipro. Those are large Jewish community, more than 60,000 people potentially. And we estimate that if the war will escalate to those regions, they will run away as well.
But one question just to tag onto that is, we all know that from here we can't do very much other than donate money and support and make sure that these operations can proceed. But we do have a question asking if there is a room for volunteers or if you need volunteers from Australia.
So the answer is yes, but with one condition: they have to speak Russian. And I know there's 15 or 20,000 speaking Russian Jews, I think, in Australia. I remember my time. Is those majority of them, by the way, doesn't speak English. And we are very happy to any support, but the most important thing is someone that will speak with them with their languages. So at this stage, okay, at this stage, we need Russian speakers. If things will change, then definitely we will notify you and get more and more volunteers. Interesting story, in all of our hotels, we've opened free shops. Valentina said we give from underwear to clothing, from diapers to food for the dogs or for the cats, and from doctors. So at this stage, I will keep it for Russian speakers. Later on, we will update you if it's needed.
So if anybody does want to volunteer, I suggest that they firstly go through either Designers Federation or through Keren Ayesod, and then we can get you real information as to whether there's a role for you.
We currently have a group of 14 volunteers from Montreal who speak Russians in Poland. So definitely we are open for any kind of assistance in that.
And Valentina, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I really want to also mention some personal stories, right?
Please,
and I have to tell you that even though I got back from Romania almost 3 weeks ago, I still receive calls from people asking me how when they're on the border, and they're calling me and asking how they can make Aliyah. And obviously I do know how to provide all information, related information, and to put them in touch with relevant people. But as was mentioned before, in the end of the day, from speaking about larger numbers, the fact that we see on those people is their personal story. And I have to tell you one story, because we're really short on time, of people. And usually, in educational world, and I'm coming from this background, it's kind of the seeds that you split around, and you never know how and when you will be able to see the result of your work. And in these special missions, we do actually have opportunities to see those people making their way to Israel and finding their place in here. So when I was in Romania, one night, just a random woman called me when she got to one of our hotels that I was managing, and told me, okay, I have a guy 70 years old, speaking of Dnipro, coming from Dnipro, and he has no one with him, just him by himself. So she brought him to the lobby and left him here. She had no personal or family connection with this person. So he told me that he ran from Ukraine by himself, and he left behind him his mother and his twin sister, and that his dad is in Israel with his another sister. And he's interested in going to Israel, obviously. And when we were there, we were able to make an appointment with Nativ, as was mentioned before, and we already registered him to one of the programs that was supposed to be opened in Kromiel. And I left to Israel, I spent there 2 weeks, and I went back home. And one day he called me saying, like, listen, I have a problem. My dad told to the consulate when I was in the covenant that he cannot afford me, and he's not ready for me to come. And I can't go back to Ukraine because in 2 months I'm going to be 18 and I will have to draft. From one hand, from another hand, there is no one who is waiting for me in Israel. So obviously what I made through, I've checked with the director of the reception center in Kromiel that they're waiting for him. I called to consulate and told him, David, it's okay for us. We're about to take care of this kid. Please let him go. And Sasha was able to come to Israel a week ago or so. He made his way to Kromiel. And last week, when I was in Jerusalem in the Jewish Agency's headquarters, I was able to see Sasha around with other kids who came and made their way to Israel. See him smiling and building his future life here. That was the best prize or the best present that I could potentially think about. And there are more and more of these personal stories and calls that I've been able to receive from those who've already, got a bit of rest, realized what happened to them on their way here, and start calling and say how they're grateful for everything that we were able to do for them. And without your support, we would never be able to do such a work.
Beautiful. Now to sort of combine two of the questions on the chat. again, to both of you or either of you, just to give us some idea of the demographic profile of Ukrainian Jews. But the second one is we try and stay off the politics. But, one of the things that looks odd in Australia, or from Australia, I should say, is that, we know about the history of anti-Semitism in the Ukraine. I actually had the privilege of visiting Kyiv with a Jewish agency delegation a few years ago. And on Shabbat, we were told, we can't walk around in the street without kippot safely and so forth. And yet now it's got a Jewish president, had a Jewish prime minister. What is the story of anti-Semitism in the Ukraine? And is it playing a role in the current situation? So the demographics and anti-Semitism, if either of you want to try and tackle that.
I'll give Valentina to answer about the demographic, and I will answer about the politics.
Okay, so as far as I know, the Jewish population of Ukraine before the war was around 200,000 people. Jews, and we're talking about Jews under a law of returning. Some of these people were really, really involved with the Jewish local communities and were participating in the community life. And some of them would never think about their Jewish roots before the war started. So I think it's really, really diverse population, as we know, who most of them had their Jewish families and their Jewish law, and they were aware about their background, but it was really, really dependent on the community and what their interests were of being involved with. So I think
a young population, an old population, many children, one like in a Russian situation. What would be the?
I think I will answer in terms of in the context of what I was able to see on the border. And again, it's really, really different from what we used to live before. Because again, most of the people who've asked to come now to Israel, who express their want to make Aliyah, were older people and women with kids. But again, we do remember that these women and these families left behind their brothers and fathers and partners and so on.
Okay, Shay, you want to tackle the anti-Semitism question?
Yes, I think that we need to separate between governmental level and the people that are living over there. From the government point of view and the leadership and the management of the country of Ukraine, I think there not have been better time for the Jews of Ukraine. Okay. Anti-Semitic attack was condemned. The government is working very hard in order to prevent anti-Semitic attack. So the government and Israel-Ukraine relationship, at least up to the war, were extremely well. Okay. So I can tell you that as a government, there's a strong fight against anti-Semitism. But on the people level, from the village or from the city, there are events, they are tackled, but I think that this is not what the government is in favor of. On the contrary, the government is trying to fight any kind of anti-Semitism event against the Jewish community. I want to tell you at least 3 short stories, Ron. I think because we say we're saving life, and I can tell you that we're really saving life. Literally, there's no other words for that. We evacuated more than 100 Holocaust survivors from the Ukraine to Israel, now giving housing. At least my WhatsApp, I'm getting every day 5, 6, 7, 10 calls from a neighbor, from a friend, from someone who knows someone. And Shay, I have a cousin stuck somewhere. I have a family over there. Can you please help us to bring them outside of the Ukraine? And you see the amount of people that need the support. But on Thursday, when I was in Poland, we met Oleg and Sergei. The grandmother of Oleg was Hasidat Umot HaOlam. If you can help me with the translation over here. A non-Jewish woman who saved Jews in the Holocaust.
Righteous Gentile.
Right, exactly. And a grandson and a grand-grandson, which is handicapped. We brought them to our hotel, and then they made Aliyah. Israel have decided that all of those who are family members of them can come and live in Israel. And the word of Sergei is the child, which is approximately 35 years old today, said the following: I couldn't imagine that something that my grandmother did 80 years ago will save my life today. And I think that's something unbelievable to understand and to see. We saw family that their houses was ruined in Mariupol, and there's nowhere for them to go. And actually taking the people that literally have nothing left back otherwise, businesses ruined and anything else. So we're really saving people's life. Now, people that we took out from Mariupol or from Kharkov before, by the way, there's a very famous now story about Bucha, the city where
Yes.
there was a genocide. We have people that have left over there just 2 weeks before the war, a doctor and two kids. And I finish by telling you a very sad story, is that we are seeing in the borders itself harsh and crucial situation where family need to separate. For those of you who are not aware, if you are in the age of 18 to 60, if you are a male, you cannot leave Ukraine. And the amount of people that we see coming to the borders and have to make a decision, should the family leave and I will stay behind, is huge. I don't want to compare it to other times in history where people need to make those kind of decisions, but you can imagine yourself a family coming to the border, pleading towards the police officer over there, please let someone go. And they are very strict, I have to say, the Ukrainian. And we see the stories, we see these difficulties, hopefully they can reunite. But a sad picture that I can tell you, when you come in to see the airplanes landing in Ben Gurion Airport, you see women, you see children, and you see elderly. You hardly see any men or teenagers, and that's cruel. That's very cruel, and I hope that in the future that will change.
So just to remind people watching this Zoom that your chance is to ask questions, put it in the Q&A, please, and I'll do my best to ensure that we cover them as long as they're on topic. So coming back to a topic we discussed earlier on, which is really, I guess, the question of how many Jews there are in the Ukraine and Russia. You gave an outline of the numbers of Jews that you thought there were, both a combined eligibility on the basis of halakha and the law of return. Is this proving very difficult or controversial, or is it just accepted that at the moment we've just got to get everybody out that we can and we'll worry about later eligibility? You did address that in part, but if you can do a little bit more on that, would be appreciated.
So our answer is we're bringing everyone under the law of return. We don't do any separation. Even though, I'll tell you another story. Sometimes we have family that came under the law of return, and they brought the grandfather with them, and the grandfather is not eligible to make Aliyah. And we have decided we're going to bring them to Israel anyway, because it doesn't make sense to separate the family in those situations, those conditions, even if he's not eligible. I personally think that if 1,000 uneligible people who come to Israel and will stay, that's a relatively low price we can pay in order to save others. So we walk under the law of return. We're bringing everyone who's eligible. And for those who are not, and there are a few of them, we have to going to manage later on.
Valentina, did you want to add anything?
I will just add that, and at the end of the day, once people would ask to, to stay in the hotel that we pre-booked for them, we didn't answer in the entrance what their plans are. And we served a lot of Israelis, and we served a lot of Jews who made decision to continue on, right? Like not necessarily come to Israel, but did ask for a bed and for a hot meal and for shower, and they were welcomed. And after 24 hours, they will usually make their decision for the future steps.
Right, fantastic. So, yeah, sorry.
At one evening, I got a call from our shaliach in Romania, Notkin, and he told me, Shay, I have a bus of 200 people that just arrived to our hotel, and there's another bus coming tomorrow with Olim, and they don't want to make Aliyah, they want to go to other places. What should we do with them? I will not have place to the Olim. And I told him, let them in, we will hire another hotel, because we will not leave, even someone doesn't want to make Aliyah, chaval, that's his choice, but we will not abandon any Jew who need our support. So that's why we extended our hotels as much as we can in all of those cities. And you can imagine in Romania, there's not a big variety, by the way.
Yeah, but so is there a problem in finding accommodation? I mean, because there's many more refugees than just the ones that we're dealing with.
So in Moldova, we have a problem.
Right.
That's why the community have took the community center, and we took the school, and we created from the classroom a temporary hotel. In Poland, it's relatively okay, and also in Hungary. In Romania, we did go to a stage where we had more than 1,000 rooms and it was difficult to find. So we left Bucharest and we went to other rural area in Romania, like in Iași.
Right. And the weather itself, is that proving to be an obstacle or?
For us, no, but for the Olim, yes.
Okay.
And I'll tell you why.
Yes.
Because in the first couple of days to cross the borders could have taken you between 24 hours to 48 hours, like from a day to two. Just imagine people with children on the borders waiting in the queue in the Ukrainian or the Polish cold. So that was definitely a difficult situation for those people, definitely. Our people were waiting warmly in a tent, covered, they were fine. But for those who need to cross the border, it was a nightmare.
All right.
I would add.
Oh, sorry, Valentina, please.
I want to add on top of that. That was really clear for us when we saw for the first time these people coming, that because of the conditions that they were standing on the border and the way that they were supposed to make to Bucharest, let's say, was really clear that they will need the med support and the medical treatment. And when we got there, we obviously made the mapping of our needs. And one of our urgent needs was to make sure that we'll have the medical treatment. And we raised this need to the headquarters, and we received a couple of solutions. If we received also the support and the solution from the local doctors, from medical centers, but also the special mission who came, doctors and nurses who came from Israel. So this was something that was really, really needed. Because in the end of the day, I found myself at one point with 4 ambulances at the same time, needed to translate everything. It was really clear for me that we have to provide those people with needed services. And speaking of serving life, this what served a lot of their lives there.
And countries like Poland and Hungary and Romania and so forth, which are taking in, or these border countries, taking in these refugees and allowing them across, how are they working with the Jewish agency? I mean, there must be a burden off them that the Jewish agency is actually doing what it's doing.
So I can tell you that first of all, you have to see it. I was in Romania and I was in Poland. It's a very organized system.
Right.
The Polish one and the Romanian taking the Olim, put them in 2 spaces until they move on. I think that in a way we are very important for them, because we take care properly of the Olim. For their point of view, it doesn't matter if you're Ukrainian Jew or not. But knowing that we are there, taking care of them. Actually, it seems very strange to them from time, this Jewish agency with a vest, and how come you're Jewish taking those to you? How come? But they are enjoying, I would say, our services. So they feel very comfortable working with us, and they gave us a lot of support.
So there's a lot of cooperation, because as I said before, we're taking a lot of the burden off them to allow this. Look, I'm trying to stay off the politics, but some of the questioners still want to get into the politics. So let me just make it half a political question. How is Zelensky himself viewed in Israel, would you say, by the average Israeli? I don't want to get into his Knesset speech and the Shoah and all this, but just generally, it would seem that all over the world he's playing the right card to get the populations on side and the sympathy and the support.
So I think there's 2 populations that we need to deal with in Israel. One is the former Soviet Russian speakers, and the regular Israelis, or the veteran Israelis, for that sake. First of all, I have to say, we got blessed. We always speak about 1 million Jews who made Aliyah from Russia, and that was a blessing to Israel. Now when we need the volunteers and we need people on the ground like Valentina and others, we saw that as a huge advantage. Just imagine if we had to take care of all those Ukrainian Jews coming and we had the ability to speak their language. But that's a side note. I think that from the Russian speakers during Israel and the Ukrainian, there's huge support to Zelensky, huge support. In our absorption center, when we have our programs, you can see that. And by the way, from the Russians and from the Ukrainian. So definitely, I think Zelensky is getting a lot of respect in that perspective. For the majority of Israeli, I would say they are in favor of the Ukraine, but not heavily involved. We do see a lot of people that want to volunteer. So generally speaking, I would say that Zelensky is getting support, but more in the Russian-Ukrainian population and relatively in the Israeli public.
Valentina, you want to add to that one?
I have to tell that I think as our mission of the Jewish Agency here, we help to people. We help to our people, and we do serve Russian Jews and Ukrainian Jews coming to our gates. We don't make any separation, and I think it's on us as people who brought those people to show how, after the whole way that they were need to make to here, in the end of the day, today they're Israelis, and they have to learn how to live together, and sometimes maybe even to leave their views and what they brought and tension that they brought from their countries, and to rebuild their life. And I do see in this situation an opportunity, because in the end of the day, it's their opportunity for them to see each other and to talk to each other and to understand the two of narratives, which is really important part of it as well.
Okay, thanks. We've got a question also just from a practical point of view. COVID. Is COVID interfering? Is COVID just the same as everywhere else? Are they bringing more COVID with them? I mean, what is the COVID situation?
So Valentina,
or is it not a question at all?
So Valentina can tell you that she got COVID in Romania during the work with the
Valentina,
agency.
okay. She looks, thank God, she looks fine.
But I can tell you two things that we've done together with the government. All of those who are coming from Ukraine are exempt from a COVID test before flying to Israel. Okay, and they just need to fill the Aliyah application form. And now, not as individuals, we do it as a group, and we are giving that to the Israeli authorities. So we got a couple of akalot, less restrictions of volume coming from Ukraine.
Okay, so we're coming closer to the end of our chat, and still there's the opportunity for people to ask questions if they want to ask questions. But Valentina, you said earlier on that you had more personal stories, and I would like to hear at least one or two more personal stories. I think that at the end of the day, we talk about numbers and numbers and numbers, and it's very important, but it's a little harder to comprehend when the human story that's going on.
I think I will mention two. Okay. One of the stories really showcasing what Shay was talking about the separation between the family members. So when I was in Romania, one of the leaders of one of the buses that arrived from Kharkiv was run by Lena. Lena was our local representative of the Jewish Agency. She used to work with Masa participant recruiting for Masa. And she came over with her two small kids, being pregnant. And she told me, listen, I've left behind my husband, and I'm about to start the whole process, and I would love to help you with all the work. By the way, without the volunteers from grassroots, from the Olim itself, we would never be able to make all the work that we were there. Right. They were really organizing themselves, opening the WhatsApp group, doing everything, collecting the needs, everything that they potentially can do in order to also to find some sort of acts for themselves, but also to helping each other. So Lena came up to me 2 or 3 days afterwards saying, listen, my husband, my partner, maybe had a chance to cross the border from Ukraine to Hungary, but I have to go there in order to push them from there. And I told her, listen, Lena, we're in Bucharest. It's like around, 12 hours driving from Budapest. Like, how are you going to do it? So she purchased the ticket for her and her two kids, standing on the whole way through for 17 hours because she was able to purchase only 2 tickets, only for her kids. They got sick on the way to Budapest, and when I texted her, like asking what's going on, she told me, listen, the plan didn't work out, and I'm gonna stay here until he will be able to cross the border, and I will have to the Jewish Agency Center in Budapest, but I'm not about to leave before he will be able to cross. So speaking of heroism and speaking of heroes of these stories, these women are heroes. I see it this way. This is one of the stories, And another one that Shay mentioned, Rostik Notkin. And I have to tell you who was my partner in this mission and who was my commander in this mission. I have to tell you that Rostik, I have a personal collection because everything here is personal. Rostik was the director of my first Jewish agency's summer camp when I was 10, when he was on Shlichut in Russia.
Very nice.
Second time when I met Rostik was 8 years ago when he asked me to go to summer camp in Ukraine, a special summer camp right with the Jewish Agency for Kids from Area War. And the third time was now working with him and have pleasure working with him for 2 weeks and making this mission work. So one night, Rusting and myself were in one of our hotels and arrived the bus. Everyone, took their bags and started came to the reception and started getting their kids and so on. And the driver called us and saying, okay, you have another one inside. We got on the bus. We saw old person laying on the back of the bus with no ability of moving. Very massive guy, more than 100 kilos. And we're like, okay, what are we gonna do? So we obviously would asked for some help from the Valentina and so on. We put them to the room. There, we're talking about a very, very sick person who during his time also, speaking of COVID, got COVID, was hospitalized in the local hotel. But last week, this person, Vladimir, was able to come to Israel on the special net flight. And he already, because these stories, when you have to follow what's going on. You can't just leave it as is. So we do know that he made his way to Israel, and he's just waiting for the social housing. And there is a place the place will be able to host him. And speaking of mitzvot, and speaking of what's the reason that we're doing what we're doing and how we've been doing it. I personally was born in Russia, and for me as a Jewish agency, Russian-speaking professional, it was really clear that I will find myself on the ground because it is my responsibility, as it was responsibility for everyone who made this mission there with me and continue doing it on the ground.
Wonderful, kol hakavod. If I could ask Shay to just in 1 minute tell us what, one of our last questions here, what are the biggest things that Australians can actually do to assist in these efforts?
So first of all, I think to tell the story, Ron. It's important, I think, that every Jew that is affiliated, not affiliated, will be proud of the work that we are doing on behalf of the Jewish world. And I think that's a message to be sent out that every Jew, no matter where he is, no matter what time, Israel, the Jewish agency, will be for him, even if he lives now in good condition and maybe not in the future. So first of all, to tell the story, it's a proud moment, I think, for the Jewish people. The secondly is volunteers, as we mentioned before. Volunteers who speak the language at this stage can come and help us to work with the Olim. And thirdly, this is part of the mission and this is part of the UIA to support financially. This effort costs obviously a lot of money. And we need the support in order to be able to do it. We will do everything that is needed, there's no question. Okay, we will raise the money, but that will not be something to block us from doing whatever we need to do. So I think those are the 3 main important things.
Thank you very much. I didn't ask one of the other more political questions, but I wanted to end off my part of this by saying thank you very much. Fantastic job that you, the Jewish Agency, is doing. It makes me really proud to be part of the Jewish Agency. And in the political questions about Prime Minister Bennett and the discussions with Putin and how Israel's treading that fine line between Russia and the Ukraine and its relations with everybody else, I just want to remind people that the whole of Jewish life is a tension between the continuity of Jewish values and the value of Jewish continuity. And it's between those 2 thoughts and disciplines that we have to, as a minority, walk this very fine line. So thank you very much to both of you, more for what you're doing, but also for participating and informing with us tonight. And I really appreciate it. And on behalf of all of us, thank you and kol hakavod. And back to Bren.
Thank you, Ron, and thank you, Shay and Valentina. Your efforts and the efforts of the extraordinarily brave men and women to rescue those in need and to help them integrate into a completely new society is something to be celebrated. The ZFA's next webinar is scheduled for 15th of May, which is a perfect date for us to discuss what it is we are going to discuss. We will be speaking with Fleur Hassan Nahum, the Deputy Mayor of Jerusalem. We will be discussing with her Yom Ha'Aliyah, Jerusalem Day, and her role in advancing Israel's relationships with the Gulf Arab states ever since the signing of the Abraham Accords a year or so ago. Of course, we'll send you out details in due course. In the meantime, I wish you all Chag Pesach Sameach, and thank you again to Valentina and to Shay.
תודה רבה.
And
תודה, חג שמח.
Hag Sameach, fantastic. Thank you.